It's over for them. High Strategos Valix leaned back in his seat, his elongated fingers tapping against the smooth metallic armrest as he watched the latest vote tally illuminate on the central display. The chamber's vaulted walls reflected streaks of shifting color, a deliberate effect meant to impress, to intimidate. It reminded Valix of a dying creature thrashing before the inevitable stillness. The council had spoken. Humanity was finished. The chamber swelled with voices, guttural tones, sharp clicks, the rasp of dry, scaled throats, vibrating in smug delight. The Galactic Council had rarely been this unified on anything, but on the matter of humanity's withdrawal, agreement was nearly unanimous. Orin Drex, Chancellor of the Council, allowed himself a slow exhale. His double set of nostrils flared, exuding the musk of satisfaction native to his species. He rose, his heavy robes shifting with an undulating grace as he turned toward the center dais, where Earth's delegation stood in rigid silence. Admiral Kieran Holt stood at the forefront, arms folded behind his back, his expression carved from stone. Beside him, Prime Minister Doran Skell carried the weight of formal diplomacy, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed the same restrained fury. "Come now, Admiral," Drex intoned, his voice edged with condescension. "There is no need for theatrics. We acknowledge your departure. A regrettable loss, truly. But you must understand, the galaxy moves forward with or without you." Laughter rippled through the assembly. Valix let a slow smirk settle on his face, the ridges along his jaw flexing with amusement. Pathetic humans. Always clinging to their pride like a broken shield. Holt's eyes swept across the chamber, cataloging the sneering faces, the leering gazes. Then he stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried not the weight of anger, nor defeat, but something far worse, finality. The mistake wasn't ours. A silence settled, abrupt and unnatural. Even those who had been chuckling found their mirth caught in their throats. "You assume we need you. You assume your markets matter to us, that your laws have ever been ours to obey. But we were never part of your empire, we merely tolerated it." Valix sat straighter, eyes narrowing. Holt let his gaze linger, the weight behind his words pressing into the air like a gathering storm. "And now we are done tolerating it." Without another word the human delegation turned, not in a hasty retreat, not with hesitation, but with a quiet, measured resolve that sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. A thunderous clang rang out as the great doors sealed behind them. It was Drex who exhaled first, a chuffing sound that broke the unnatural quiet. A moment later, others joined him, a rising tide of amusement, a wave of scoffing dismissal. "They'll be back," Drex mused, waving a hand as if dismissing a minor inconvenience. "Give it a few cycles, they will beg for our aid soon enough." Valix let out a short, dry chuckle. He wasn't as certain as Drex, but it didn't matter. Humanity had made their choice, and in doing so had doomed themselves. Without the Council's infrastructure, their trade routes would collapse. Their technology, advanced as it was, relied on materials they could no longer acquire. Their colonies would wither. There was nothing left to discuss. The Council turned their attention to more pressing matters. But out in the void, something had already begun to shift. The Zorvon Dominion fleet arrived at the outer perimeter of what had once been human-controlled space, their warships cutting through the black like gleaming shards of obsidian. High Strategos Valix stood at the command deck of the Sovereign Wrath, his eyes fixed on the projected star maps before him, or at least where the maps said humanity's colonies should be. "Where are they?" Captain Varric Talon's voice carried a measured urgency, his reptilian pupils constricting as he studied the readings. Valix didn't answer immediately. His fingers curled against the cold metal railing as he leaned in. Planets didn't just disappear, and yet there they stood, empty coordinates, barren sectors where thriving settlements had been recorded just months prior. Entire systems absent, as if they had never existed. Even the Council's deep space tracking beacons, the ones placed long before humanity had even set foot among the stars, had gone dark. A flickering unease threaded its way through the bridge. Officers exchanged glances, hands hesitating over controls, tails twitching, mandibles clicking softly. It was the kind of silence that bred superstition. "Long-range scans," Valix ordered. A moment later, the readout populated with raw data, an ocean of numbers and fluctuating energy patterns. Captain Talon's brow ridges pulled together. "This doesn't make sense." The gravity wells of those missing systems remained. The natural pull of mass still existed, yet there was nothing there. No light signatures, no planetary structures, no electromagnetic bleed. It was as if entire worlds had been wrapped in a veil of nothingness. Or worse, consumed. "Run the scans again," Valek said, quieter this time. The results were the same. A sharp staccato alarm cut through the bridge. The communications officer's fingers flew across the panel. His movements quick, clipped with restrained urgency. "Sir, we've lost contact with Recon Fleet Gamma." Valek turned sharply. "Clarify." The officer hesitated. They entered the Oort boundary just before transmission ceased. No distress call, no energy spike. Just gone. The bridge's collective breath stilled. Valek's gaze flicked to the viewport. The emptiness beyond felt heavier than before. A comlink crackled open, a secondary transmission slicing through the ship's intercom, but no voice accompanied it, just static. Then beneath the distortion, something else. A whisper. It wasn't words, not really, but it carried weight, a resonance that seeped into the bones, something primal that bypassed thought and settled like ice in the gut. It was wrong. Captain Talon exhaled sharply, forcing a laugh. A distortion. Some residual energy from... No, Valek interrupted. The whisper wasn't originating from deep space. It was broadcasting from inside the ship. Before Valek could issue another order, the lights dimmed, the starfield outside flickering like a dying pulse. And then, as if the universe itself was exhaling, the stars beyond shifted. Not by movement, not by distance, but by something far worse. A slow, deliberate realignment of reality itself. Something was here, watching, waiting. Valek's fingers tightened over the railing, his mind racing through every strategic contingency, every tactical deployment. But none of them accounted for this. He had come expecting a corpse, a dying empire gasping for relevance. Instead, he found something else, something hungry. And for the first time in his long, brutal career, high strategos, Valek felt the creeping whisper of fear. The sovereign wrath drifted in the abyss, its hull bathed in the light of distant, indifferent stars. The bridge carried an unnatural stillness, a silence that pressed against the walls like something sentient, something watching. Valek stood rigid at the command dais, jaw locked, the whisper from moments ago still clawing at the edges of his thoughts. The data before him remained unchanged. Human space had become an impossible void, a stretch of nothing where entire planetary systems had once stood. The residual gravitational pull suggested those celestial bodies should be there, but they weren't. Captain Talon's voice broke the silence, his tone sharpened by barely veiled apprehension. "Orders, strategos?" Valek exhaled through his teeth. "We advance." Talon hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. The command relayed, and the Zorvan fleet surged forward. Thousands of warships moving in seamless unison. Energy signatures flared along their armored spines, thrusters cutting through the dark like golden scars. Valek watched the star charts update. The Council's largest armada in recorded history was gathering behind them. 30,000 ships, 60 species unified under a singular objective: to erase humanity's defied. No matter what anomaly lay ahead, no matter what unnatural absence clouded human space, brute force would crush whatever remained of Earth's arrogant rebellion. And yet, a weight settled deep in his gut. An unspoken warning curled around his thoughts like a slow-moving vice. A warning he ignored. The first signs of instability came before the fleet even crossed the threshold. It started as a shift, not motion, but something deeper, something beneath the laws of nature. The sensory feeds flickered, warping as if space itself was breathing. "Do you see that?" Talon muttered, his clawed fingers tightening around the railing. Valek did. The stars outside moved, not in the expected pattern of orbital drift, not even with the aberrations of gravitational lensing. They twisted, stretching into impossible shapes, bending where nothing should bend. "This is a malfunction," one of the junior officers whispered, though the unease in his eyes betrayed his disbelief. The fleet's formation held steady, but distress signals flared at irregular intervals. Valek's second in command, Fleet Marshal Tovak Wren, approached with deliberate steps. His deep-set eyes narrowed. "We've lost communication with the forward squadrons." "Define lost." Valek's voice remained level. No response, no wreckage, no debris. They were there one moment, and then they weren't. A ripple of tension spread across the bridge. Velox straightened. Continue forward. Full battle stance. The orders echoed through the command channels, and warships aligned into strategic assault formations. Planetary siege cruisers held at the rear, long-range artillery vessels in calculated positions. Fighters deployed in sweeping arcs, their formations scalpel-sharp, honed to perfection. Then came the second disappearance. 17 vessels. Gone. No warning. No trace. One of the tactical officers let out a sharp breath, tapping frantically at his console. There's something wrong with the trajectory data. The fleet isn't moving as projected. Explain. Our readings show we've been holding the same coordinates for 20 minutes, but our systems say we've advanced nearly 1,000,000 kilometers. A cold, visceral wrongness spread through the bridge like an unseen fog. Velox's spine stiffened. Confirm that. Confirmed, sir. Our fleet is moving at full speed, but we are not progressing in any measurable way. The words settled like lead in the air. Impossible. The fleet was trapped in forward motion, like a predator swimming deeper into a current it couldn't feel. Then the first warning klaxons erupted, red strobes flashing across the command deck. Something's approaching. Velox's gaze snapped to the tactical display. There, on the outer periphery of the fleet's sensor range, anomalous distortions coalesced. Unreadable energy signatures, fluctuating patterns that defied recognition. Then, like jagged glass breaking across a mirror, space itself fractured. Rippling distortions tore through the fleet's formation, ships breaking apart without impact. Entire squadrons severed from reality. Fighters veered in erratic spirals, their trajectories collapsing in on themselves before imploding into singular points of light. A comm officer screamed, not in pain but in something worse. Terror. Velox snapped his gaze to the viewport. Beyond the shattered remains of his lead squadrons, the first human warships emerged. They were raw, sleek constructs of blackened metal, their forms shifting as if light itself couldn't decide where to land on them. They did not shimmer. They did not flicker. They simply became. No transmissions. No battle declarations. Tovak Ren murmured, his voice too steady, as though holding back a deeper dread. They are waiting. Velox's throat tightened, not with fear. No, he refused to name it that. But with something cold, something edge. These were not the crude warships of humanity's past. These were weapons designed for something else. Fire, Velox commanded, cutting through the heavy air. Missiles screamed from their silos. Plasma lances surged forward, burning streaks of death across the emptiness. And nothing landed. No detonations. No explosions. No impacts. The weapons simply ceased to be. One moment they existed. The next they did not. As if they had never been fired at all. The bridge fell deathly silent. The human fleet remained motionless, unmoved. Then came the transmission, a single voice, smooth and steady, slipping through the comm channels without permission. Turn back now. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement, a declaration. Velox exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders, forcing the tension from his muscles. We do not turn. A pause. Then the voice returned. You do not belong here anymore. The transmission cut, and the human warships vanished. Not through propulsion, not through hyperspace drives. They simply ceased to occupy the same reality. The bridge stood froze. Tactical displays flickered, with empty static. The fleet's remaining formations struggling to reposition, their targeting systems failing to anchor to anything real. Velox took a single step forward, his fingers curled against the cold railing, his claws digging in, not out of rage, but necessity. He had expected a war. What he found was something else entirely. His throat felt dry. Continue the advance, he ordered. No one moved. Now, hesitation rippled through the bridge, but the order was obeyed. The fleet pressed onward, and as they moved deeper into what had once been human-controlled space, the stars themselves began to change, as if they too had turned their backs on the Council. The fleet pushed forward, but space itself twisted against them. Velox could feel it, not through instruments, not through data, but in his bones. The moment they crossed deeper into former human territory, reality became something unnatural. The stars drifted in ways they shouldn't, their light stretching and contracting, betraying the very fabric of motion. We've lost another battle group, Tovak Ren announced, voice low, unreadable. Velox didn't respond immediately. His jaw tightened, his gaze fixed on the void ahead. How? Same as before, no transmissions, no wreckage. One moment they were there, the next, a sharp intake of breath. The comms officer recoiled from his console, his mandibles twitching. "Sir, you need to see that." The screen flickered, showing the last recording from Battle Group Theta, before its disappearance. The footage was wrong, not distorted, not damaged. Wrong. The video began normally, ships holding formation, scanning instruments sweeping the void. Then, in an instant, the fleet wasn't there anymore. No impact, no interference, just gone. Yet something remained. Where the ships had been, shadows stretched unnaturally, bleeding into the backdrop of space, not cast by anything physical, not formed by any known source of light. They twisted, elongating into grotesque mockeries of what had once been solid vessels, their shapes stretching, as if something unseen had rewritten their existence, leaving only the echo of what they once were. "That isn't possible," Talon muttered, his claws digging into his arms. And yet, Tovak Ren exhaled. It happened. Valix forced himself to turn away. No matter what anomaly had consumed those ships, no matter how unnatural, the fleet would not retreat. They had come to conquer, and conquer they would. "Bring the fleet into attack formation. We engage immediately." The commands echoed through the bridge, and the entire armada responded. Warships moved into tight formations. Siege cannons charged. Planetary-class artillery locked targets across the void. Fighter squadrons spread into flanking maneuvers, their formations fluid, aggressive. And then, at last, the enemy appeared. Not suddenly, not through conventional arrival. They simply were. Humanity's fleet slid into existence as though they had always been there. Unnoticed, unseen, sleek, black constructs, with shifting edges, as if they weren't entirely bound by material reality. Their hulls carried no insignias, no markings, no identification codes. They had been reborn into something else. The silence stretched. Then, Valix gave the order, "Fire everything." Missiles ignited, torpedoes streaked forward, pulse cannons unleashed cascading waves of destruction. The void swallowed it all. No impacts, no detonations. The moment the projectiles reached the human fleet, they ceased to exist, not intercepted, not blocked, unmade. Talon's breath came sharp. "Physics doesn't apply," Tovak finished, his voice low. Then the humans responded, not with return fire, not with shields, with something worse. Their warships moved, not through thrust, not through force. They simply existed somewhere else. Instantly, the first Zorvan dreadnought came apart in perfect silence, not an explosion, not a collapse. One moment intact, the next a broken husk, stretched thin across dimensions, pulled apart into something that should not be. Then the next ship, then another, then dozens. "They aren't attacking," one officer gasped, horror bleeding into his voice. "They're just unmaking us." Valix's mind churned, pushing back against the panic clawing at the edges of his discipline. He had seen annihilation. He had orchestrated planetary cullings. He had stood upon worlds that burned beneath his rule. But this was not war. This was extinction. He gritted his teeth, rewrote energy to full barrier shielding, form layered battle groups. Static cut through the comms. Then a voice. Smooth, steady, human. "We told you to leave." The bridge went still. Valix's claws twitched against the armrest. "Identify yourself." A pause. Then, Admiral Kieran Holt, Supreme Commander of the Human Expeditionary Forces. The title hung between them. Weighty, final. Valix clenched his fists. "I will not negotiate. We never asked you to," Holt answered. The human fleet shifted. Their ships, if they could still be called that, began moving, not in attack patterns, not in defensive formations, but with purpose. Valix didn't understand it at first. Then, his tactical officer's voice cracked through the tension. "Sir, our exit routes." He looked at the star maps. Every strategic retreat had been sealed, not by weapons, by reality itself. "They're cutting us off," Tovak whispered. Valix's mind raced. If they had been lured here, if this had been the plan from the start. "This isn't a battle," Talon muttered, dawning horror sinking into his voice. "It's a demonstration." The human fleet ceased moving. They didn't need to. The Council Armada, the greatest military force assembled in history, had already lost. You mocked our exit. Holt's voice came again, softer now. Now watch as we end your dominion. The transmission cut, and then the final stage began. Reality fractured. Not an explosion, not an energy surge. Something deeper. The Zorvan flagship tilted sideways in space, pulled by forces no one could measure, no one could counteract. Valix grabbed onto the command panel as the gravity within his own ship fluctuated violently. He could hear it. Not a sound, but a feeling. A rupture in existence itself. Ships collapsed in on themselves, others twisted into spirals of metal and flesh, as if time itself had become unhinged. Sir, what do we? The officer never finished his sentence. He simply ceased. Not dead, not destroyed. Gone. Valix's eyes burned. His heartbeat thundered in his skull. Panic threatened to unravel him. No, no. This was impossible. He had to find a way to turn the tide. He forced his voice to work, his throat raw. Order all remaining forces to regroup. We are not done. But he knew, even as the fleet staggered, even as what remained of the once mighty armada desperately clung to any semblance of strategy, he knew the war had already ended. They were merely witnessing their own ruin. And as Valix's eyes locked onto the impossible constructs of the human fleet, he understood. They had not abandoned space. They had become something greater. The next phase was coming, and no one in the galaxy was ready for it. Valix could not breathe. The bridge was a cacophony of alarms, frantic reports, and voices trembling at the edge of sanity. He barely registered the chaos. His claws dug into the armrest of his command chair as he watched his empire's greatest fleet unravel before his eyes. A battle without fire, a war without resistance. The warships that had once carried the weight of Council supremacy faltered, pulled into unnatural rifts that were neither space nor absence. Some ships burned in eerie silence, their hulls crumpling inward as if something unseen had devoured their mass. Others simply stretched, expanding into impossible geometries, their crews dissolving before their own screams could register. He had commanded fleets across 100 campaigns. He had conquered entire systems. Yet here in the cold embrace of this battlefield, he was nothing. High Strategos, we must withdraw. Tovakren's voice cut through the suffocating weight of failure. There is no withdrawal. Valix ground out. His words felt hollow, because the truth was already settling in his bones. There was nowhere to go. The fleet's escape routes had been sealed, not by blockade, not by force, but by the sheer impossibility of the space they now occupied. Their own navigational data was lies, their exit points mirages painted over reality itself. They had walked into a trap so absolute, so irreversible, that the very concept of retreat had been erased. New contacts. The tactical officer's voice cracked. They're appearing inside our formations. Valix's eyes snapped to the viewport. Human vessels were no longer approaching from a fixed direction. They were manifesting inside the fleet's defensive lines, bypassing every known law of engagement. The first response from the Council forces was instinctual. They fired, unleashing every remaining weapon in blind desperation. It was a futile reflex. The weapons did not connect. The attacks did not land. Instead, the laws of physics themselves refused to cooperate. Energy discharges veered away at unnatural angles, their trajectories bending as if repelled by an unseen force. Torpedoes twisted backward, shattering against the hulls of their own launch ships. The fleet was fighting itself, or more accurately, it was being made to fight itself. And then the human fleet began its advance. No formation, no tactical position. They simply moved, as if gliding along unseen currents, untethered to the constraints of space. The lead warship emerged before Valix's vessel, a sleek construct of darkness, its edges shifting like a mirage, and then from its core, a transmission opened. Holt's voice came again, steady, unwavering. You never understood. A slow exhale. We didn't abandon space. We rewrote it. Silence. The warships of humanity did not open fire. They did not unleash torrents of destruction. They simply acted. One by one, Council warships began vanishing, not destroyed, not broken, simply removed from the battlefield, as though they had never existed. Entire battle formations blinked out, erased from causality itself. What are they doing? Talon's voice was barely audible over the horror rippling through the bridge. No answer came, but then something worse happened. The main displays flickered. Tactical readouts were replaced by an image of the council itself. The great hall of the ruling elite, the very core of interstellar authority, now bathed in the cold glow of a forced transmission. Chancellor Oren Dreck stood at its center, his face frozen in horror. "We are under attack." The Chancellor's voice rang through the bridge. "Our fleets, our planetary defenses, nothing is responding. Nothing is." The transmission cut abruptly. Then the feed distorted, shifting into something else. A view from orbit, a view of the Council homeworlds, and what Valix saw was the final confirmation of their doom. Their worlds were vanishing. Not in fire, not in destruction, simply slipping away, dissolving into the fabric of the void, consumed by the same force that was unmaking their fleets. Holt's voice returned, quieter this time. "You thought we were limited by your rule, but we were never bound by them to begin with." The viewport dimmed, the view of the battlefield outside shifting once more. Now it showed the Sol system, but not as Valix had expected. Earth was there, but so much more stood with it. A network of structures, stations that eclipsed entire planets, rings of energy pulsing across the system in a pattern that defied known architecture. And then the final blow came. A silent pulse rippled outward. Not a weapon, not an attack. A declaration. The Council's hold on the galaxy was gone. Humanity had not only left, they had taken the stars with them. Valix's breath shuddered. This wasn't war. This was a new order, and he had never been part of it to begin with. Valix did not speak. There were no words for what he was witnessing. Through the viewport, the battlefield had ceased to exist in any meaningful way. His fleet, once an empire's hammer, now drifted in the ruins of something greater than war, greater than conquest. There were no wrecks, no debris, only empty spaces where mighty vessels had once stood. The screen still flickered with the last transmission from the Council's homeworlds, but there was nothing left to answer. The great capitals of the elder species, the seats of power that had dictated galactic history for millennia, had been erased, not destroyed, not burned, removed. Something cold curled in his gut. Humanity had never needed this war. They had moved beyond it. A pulse rippled across the fleet, a final echo of the power that had reshaped the battlefield. Valix gritted his teeth as his flagship shuddered, the unnatural distortion twisting his internal organs, as though the very laws of existence were protesting his presence. "Incoming transmission," the comms officer whispered, voice hollow. It was not a request, it was a certainty. The screen darkened, then brightened with a single image. Admiral Kieran Holt. He stood with the calm of inevitability, arms folded behind his back, his uniform immaculate despite the sheer destruction he commanded. His eyes met Valix's, and for the first time in his life the High Strategos felt small. "You still don't understand," Holt said, not unkindly. His voice carried none of the arrogance the Council had so often accused humans of. No malice, no anger, just an unshakable weight of reality folding in on itself. "You always believed power came from dominance, from conquest, from holding others beneath your heel." Holt gestured vaguely toward the nothingness beyond. "That was never power, that was fear." Valix swallowed hard, his ridged hands tightening against the armrest. This is impossible." Holt didn't smile, he didn't gloat. "To you." Behind Holt, the Sol system loomed, unrecognizable from the fractured remnants of history stored in the Council's archives. What had once been a lone blue planet, a struggling world of iron and fire, had become something incomprehensible. Energy lattices webbed across the void, linking structures that defied construction. Stations the size of moons pulsed with power. Unlike any recorded source, planetary bodies no longer followed predictable orbits, but moved as if guided by unseen hands. "You mock what you cannot grasp," Holt continued. "But we were never your subjects. We never sought your approval. While you built walls, we built pathways. While you clung to hierarchies, we shattered limits." Valix exhaled sharply. You exiled yourselves from the galaxy." His own voice sounded foreign in his throat, desperation fraying its edges. Holt's expression did not change. "No, Strategos." He leaned forward, delivering the truth like a blade pressed to a throat. "We exiled the galaxy from us." The words struck with the force of inevitability. It had never been a retreat. It had never been fear. Humanity had simply left. Left the Council's rule, left the limitations imposed upon them, left the old ways to rot. And now, They had returned, not to take back what was stolen, but to show the galaxy that it had never belonged to them in the first place. Valix's breathing was shallow, his mind racing through strategies, countermeasures, anything. But there was nothing. Holt saw the realization bloom across his face. "You built an empire of control," the human said, his voice quiet now, almost regretful. "We built something better." Silence stretched between them. Holt studied him for a moment longer, then nodded slightly, as if a final decision had been reached. "Your fleet will not return home." Valix's heart lurched. "Your council is no more." His breath quickened. "Your dominion has ended." His hands trembled against the console. Holt exhaled, the weight of history settling into his shoulders. "This is not an act of war. It is not a punishment." His gaze darkened. "It is simply the future, moving forward without you." A final command flickered across the human's console. And then, reality fractured. Valix barely had time to scream. The flagship twisted, space rippling around it as unseen forces peeled it from existence. The walls groaned, metal shrieking in protest as time itself seemed to fold inward. Not destruction, not death, a severing. The last thing Valix saw was the Sol system pulling away, not vanishing, but receding beyond reach, beyond comprehension, beyond the very fabric of the galaxy as he understood it. Then there was nothing. No council, no fleet, no empire. The last remnants of the old order had been erased, and in their place, humanity stood alone, ascendant, untouchable. The final transmission echoed across the void, across the remnants of the species who had once ruled over Earth's people with smug superiority. "You will never threaten us again." And with that, the transmission ended. No further messages were sent. No further battles were fought. Because there was nothing left to fight. Humanity had not won the war. They had ended it, and the galaxy would never be the same again.